Truth is, I thought it mattered. I thought that
money
mattered. But does it bollocks? Not compared to how people matter.
Welcome, Mention, and other fine folks, to the Sunday Dispatch of the Black Letter, where we contemplate thoughts worth thinking. This is your spectator of the spectacle, coming to you from deep inside the Upside Down, where we're trying to navigate through to a greener pastures on the other side to become healthier, wealthier, and wiser. I will apologize in advance. I have a guy outside my house here banging away on his discs and drums of his car, so you might notice that, and I do apologize. Nothing can be done at the moment. We'll try and get through this fairly quickly in that case. Got a few things on the go. We'll look at how folks are hurting in this unemployment situation, as well as how the feds and the other banksters and gangsters are trying to actively erode our wealth and create the greatest inequality we've ever seen. We'll start with Kaplan here, another one of the 1%ers running the show. Fed's Kaplan says inflation can run moderately above 2% goal. These clowns think they have their fingers on the dials to fine-tune inflation as if they're in control of everything, and they're not. And the arrogance is just astonishing, in my opinion. The Federal Reserve could allow inflation to accelerate above its 2% goal if it has underperformed it in the past, said Dallas Fed President Robert Kaplan, because we know exactly how well they've managed inflation historically, don't we? Not very well at all. Kaplan said he would be comfortable with inflation around 2.25 or 2.375%. The policy known as average inflation targeting would be a shift from the Fed's current way of keeping prices stable, in which it targets 2% regardless of what has happened in the past. I mean, they can't even keep it within 1% or 2% of the number that they want, and here they are trying to get it to 0.25% or 0.375%. It's just outrageous arrogance. You know what they say with pride often comes before a fall, right? And I think, it doesn't affect them, it affects the rest of us on John and Jane Doe on the street here, trying to make a living, working for a living, not having much savings, and that's getting eroded all the time. And these captains of industry and other banksters are actively trying to erode our wealth and increase the inequality. It's outrageous. Subdued inflation before the pandemic allowed the Fed to run the economy hotter, which spurred traditionally marginalized workers to enter the labor market. The gap between white and black unemployment reached an historic low last year. It has widened again since the onset of the coronavirus. And arguably, the inflation that they had was probably not much in their control, as much as they like to think it was. I think it was an issue with those jobs that were coming into the labor market, and the gap between the white and black unemployment was probably thanks to low-paying jobs, in my opinion. I don't have the facts or the numbers to back up that claim, but that would be what I would imagine. America's had probably a horrendous inequality problem since, I would argue, the early 90s at least, if I remember things correctly. Many thanks to Ronald Reagan, in my opinion. That's where it really started. The U.S. economy, which contracted 32.9% on an annualized basis in the second quarter, will grow 20% in the 3 months ending September 30th and 6 to 7% in the final quarter, Kaplan forecast. These guys, man, they're just like, they're worse than oracles and witch doctors with their arrogance and determination that they can foretell the future. They're like card readers and tarot readers from the local fairgrounds, right? They have no idea what they're doing, and they act as if they have total control, and even worse than that, fine control over the levers and cogs of the machine, which is the free market, allegedly. Of course, we've seen time and time again that they don't. In fact, I'm beginning to think we should just get rid of the central bank altogether, in my opinion. Doing nothing but making things worse. Good news on Bitcoin and gold, perhaps more so Bitcoin. Mike Novogratz and Dave Portnoy say buy Bitcoin and not gold. I don't give what's a polite way of saying this? I can give two hoots what Dave Portnoy thinks. But Michael Novogratz has been in the financial markets for a while, somebody to consider seriously. Michael Novogratz is a veteran Wall Street fund manager and cryptocurrency maven. He's been in the space for some time. Dave Portnoy, as many of you know, is the brash founder of a media empire who only recently began touting stocks and has disparaged Warren Buffett. Novogratz said that although he sees gold climbing above its record highs, Bitcoin is still the more worthy investment because it's harder to buy than the traditional haven. He said about 25% of his net worth is tied up in the cryptocurrency, which is quite substantial. I'm aiming for about 10, 15%, I think, overall. That's where I'd feel comfortable. Of course, none of this is financial advice. You need to do your own research, make your own decisions based on that research. But these are just ideas worth thinking, that at least I'm thinking about and I want to share with you. And when he says here it's harder to buy, basically what he means is that we have a finite number of Bitcoin. As we know, 21 million, I think, will come into existence at the end of around 2140. And that'll be all the Bitcoin that will ever be available, if Bitcoin is still around then. Whereas with gold has a certain inflationary aspect to it, although that inflation is low. I think it's somewhere between 1 and 2% or so. Whereas Bitcoin is deflationary. As time goes by, less and less coins are being mined. And after 2140 or thereabouts, there'll be no more Bitcoins to be had. So definitely harder to buy, and definitely the hardest money we have. It's only got a 20 billion market cap, while gold is over $10 trillion, Novogratz said of Bitcoin. So it's got a long way to go to catch gold in terms of just adoption. Still, he doesn't recommend beginners put in more than 1 to 2% of their money into the digital currency, and I think that's probably not a bad idea. Depending on your risk tolerance, of course, I think you could go up to 5%. Anywhere between 1 and 5% is probably not an outrageous amount, but 1 to 2 or 1 to 3% is probably certainly, I think, fine for most folks. None of this is financial advice, as I said. This is just what I'm thinking and not recommendations at all. Novogratz said Bitcoin had crossed the Rubicon on the question of whether it's a good store of value, and that basically means that it's already been determined. We can have a look here across the Rubicon. The idiom cross the Rubicon has an ancient origin. An idiom, as you probably know, is a word or group of words or phrase that has a figurative meaning that is not easily deduced from its literal definition. And if we get to the literal definition here, we'll see. To cross the Rubicon means to make a decision or take a step that commits one to a specific course of action from which there is no turning back. The expression cross the Rubicon refers to a decision made by Julius Caesar. In 49 BC, Julius Caesar was the governor of Gaul, which meant he had to give up his power in Rome. He was expressly forbidden by the Roman Senate to bring his troops back to Italy. When Caesar crossed the Rubicon, which is a stream that separated Gaul from Rome, he sparked a civil war. When crossing the Rubicon, Caesar famously uttered, "The die is cast," as he knew where this decision would inevitably take him. So I think Novogratz is right, although there's no guarantee, of course, that Bitcoin has crossed the Rubicon. But I think the chance of it becoming worthless or going away, becoming vaporware, is diminishing day by day, year by year. Certainly, it's about 11 years old now, as we know. So I think it's starting to get set in this foundation, this crossing the Rubicon. An important one, which I'm going to discuss much, was convinced by the twin brothers, Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss, who also own or founded the cryptocurrency exchange Gemini Trust, to get into Bitcoin. They say, the Winklevoss brothers say Bitcoin has the potential to replace gold as a store of value, and their reasoning, because they claim that Elon Musk has plans to mine gold from asteroids. Now, that might be true, but getting out to the asteroid belt to mine asteroids is probably at least 50 years away. So I think most of us living today, at least in our young or moderate adult lives, probably have nothing to fear about this gold asteroid mining. I think it's potential. Of course, as we know, gold is made in stars, I believe, as are most of the basic elements, my understanding. So there might be a lot of gold in asteroids, but can you imagine the cost of actually mining that? Gold would have to be probably orders of magnitude more valuable than it is currently in order for asteroid mining of gold to make sense. And it's probably, as I said, multiple decades away at the minimum. We haven't even got a man to Mars yet, let alone the asteroid belt. However, that is a legitimate claim perhaps for future generations to worry about, and perhaps why Bitcoin in 50 to 100 years will be the best store of value, if we're even in a capitalist system by then. I'm a fan of the Star Trek universe, where we sort of evolve into a post-capitalist system where everybody's wants are met freely, and at that point the pursuit is to help make the best of what you have to offer for the greater good, in my opinion. Because really there is no reason why anything has to cost anything on this earth if you really drill down into the basics, the fundamentals of it. The only reason things have to cost anything is because we use human labor and capital to create these things. But if we created robots that eventually were able to do all the manual labor, the menial work, perhaps there would be no reason for things to actually have a cost, a dollar cost to them. Anyway, that's a philosophical discussion for another time and really irrelevant at this stage. In a tweet after his interview with the Winklevoss twins, Portnoy suggested he has bought $1 million worth of Bitcoin. Now, I don't know how wealthy Portnoy is or what his net worth is, but 1 million would probably be, I would think, probably just a few percent of perhaps his net worth, if that. So again, you can start small amounts just to get your feet wet if it's something that interests you. The wonders of free money in 2 pictures, free money lesson. Advance real retail and food services sales. You can see that has been a V-shaped recovery. It's quite astounding, actually. It's very interesting. But as you can see, if you give away enough free money, spending recovers, and we've seen that here. I mean, it's basically back to where it was on this trajectory. That's not going to last, though, I believe. And Mish here talks about that as well. Adjusted for seasonal variation and holiday and trading day differences, but not for price changes, July sales were $536 billion, an increase of 1.2% from the previous month and 2.7% above July 2019. So it's a small, modest increase, but still a great increase if things were normal, but they're not. Retail spending rose for the 3rd straight month despite a rise in coronavirus infections, with reopenings stalled. Here you can see a spike in government spending. U.S. government spending spiked. Revenue dropped in fiscal 2020 during the pandemic. You can see this is during the Great Recession. And the deficit is just outrageously untethered from any sense of reality. You can see what they did spending-wise during the Great Recession is nothing compared to what they're doing right now. Conservative Republicans, older Americans, more likely to be concerned about federal deficit. I'm surprised this isn't higher. I think 90% of people should be concerned about the federal deficit. It's going to eventually come back to bite us in the ass, in my opinion. The chart from Pew shows stimulus and deficits exceed that in the Great Recession, as pointed out. The federal government has run deficits nearly every year since the Great Depression and consistently since fiscal 2002. As of the end of the fiscal 3rd quarter in June, the deficit represented 13.1% of GDP. Also a level not seen since World War II, and at the Great Recession it only reached 9.8% of GDP. Even if you close the shops, the bars, and the restaurants, people will find a way to spend money if you give it to them. These are all continued claims. You can see the numbers here in the millions, 30 and around the 30 million mark since back in April, May. Over 28 million people have been receiving weekly $600 checks for months, and we know that those have now ended. And it takes about $3 trillion in free money to keep spending about where it was. And of course, if you continue to pump out money there and people continue to spend it, you know what we get. We get high inflation. Unless people go further into debt, spending will drop at least that much in the absence of additional and retroactive stimulus. And so he's doing the math here. 50 billion basically per week is what folks will get as a bonus, $600. $50 billion in a week, and we're going to see that. So that's, if this goes on for a month, that's about $200 billion that is not going to be spent. And if they get half of that, which I think in the federal executive order that Trump did, there was $300 from the federal government and $100 from the states. Most states won't be able to give that $100. So let's say they have $300. That's basically cut in half. So we'll be looking at about $100 billion per month that's not going to be spent. In addition, people have deferred rent payments, mortgage payments, and credit card payments. Those deferrals will kick in at some point as well. All this does is encourages reckless spending, people getting into more debt, not being fiscally responsible. And I think each of us has to take some responsibility for that. If you're spending money willy-nilly out there in retail stores and yet you're putting your rent and mortgage payments on hold, I think your priorities are a bit skewed, in my opinion. Thousands of cars from mile-long line at Dallas Food Bank as families drive across Texas for a box of noodles, spaghetti sauce, peanut butter, rice, and trail mix as unemployment cripples the state. North Texas Food Bank fed 1,700 families. Thousands of people have lined up at a Texas food bank, with cars stretching for a mile as the state struggles with being the 3rd worst affected by the coronavirus outbreak. That's probably behind New York and California, I imagine. So here's the pictures. You can see it's just astonishing to me. We've never seen anything like this. In 100 years or so, if we have another great pandemic like this, or perhaps it'll come even way sooner than that, people will look back at these images as we look back now at the Spanish flu and the lines for food and the soup kitchens. Just amazing. Here's the V-shaped recovery, right? Just astonishing that in the richest country in the world, folks either are not willing to spend money on food because they can get it for free from food banks, or they literally need to have free food in order to live, right? And yet a lot of these vehicles are fairly new, so folks can afford car payments, or at least maybe they can't, but those are on hold for now. It's just a very interesting problem that we have here. I think America has a distorted list of priorities, if you will, when there's the richest nation in the world and so many people are having to go to food banks to get help with food. Yeah, we have the greatest wealth inequality, and we also have the greatest in the nation, one of the nations, perhaps certainly I think top three nations with the highest obesity rates, primarily because the food that folks can get in some of the poorer neighborhoods are generally crap food. There aren't any decent supermarkets, from what I understand, in some of the poorer neighborhoods. Just amazing. Initial jobless claims, as we know, we've seen through this. Now it's down below 900. I think next week, certainly within a couple of weeks, it'll be back up above 1 million, I would think. And here's the Texas overview. This worries me. New tests have been declining. Does that mean they don't want to find out? It's like, you know, that image of the monkey closing its eyes and putting its fingers in its ears and over its mouth so it can't hear or see or say anything. New deaths are sort of quite high as well. So an interesting article if you want to have a review of it. Not my favorite website, a bit of a tabloid website from what I can gather, but still those images are quite striking. A lot of people looking for a lot of food, that's for sure. Here's the number of infections. It's sort of been fairly stagnant. And this isn't even the second wave yet, folks. That's still to come. Here's the deaths are slowly increasing. You can see that just by looking at this chart. Wow, this is quite the chart as well, how coronavirus cases have escalated in the US. Amazing. And here's where most of the impacts are being felt. As you can see, the darker the red, the more cases are being found. So Montana and Wyoming are perhaps the lowest at the moment. Might not necessarily stay that way. And of course, Alaska and Hawaii. Yeah, that's very upsetting and unsettling news. Okay, let's take a look at the stock market, how it did on the past week. Okay, so the S&P 500 was up almost 0.5% over the week, as you can see. Not bad. I'm still expecting this to have a real big dump down, at least 50%, 80%. That might never come, of course. Here's the NASDAQ. And as you can see, this one only is up 0.06%, so barely up, practically flat over the week. But of course, the NASDAQ has been doing exceptionally well, as you know. And the Dow Jones up 1.2%. So the Dow Jones doing the best of them all, followed by the S&P, and then the laggard being the NASDAQ. So I wonder if this is maybe a rotation into some of the other stocks, or if this is just starting a slowdown of increases, and we're going to start seeing a gradual decline in the stock market overall, as perhaps we won't have a massive downdraft, but perhaps it'll be a steady erosion as we sort of tumble down a hill into that 50-60% downtrend from this point over the next year or two. I wonder if it'll work out that way. Be interesting to see. Let's see how gold and silver did over the past week. Okay, so interestingly, gold is actually down about 4% over the past week, as we can see. So that's not too bad considering the run-up it did recently. As you can see, the run-up year to date is still 27%, so taking a small break is not unexpected. And also silver is down about 6.5% on the week, as you know, also having run up even better than gold at 48% year to date. As you know, I'm not chasing silver at these levels. I'm preferring just to put money into Bitcoin at the moment, and then a little bit of savings into my, I'm not sure what it is. It's an RRSP, and here in Canada, I think it's an IRA or 401k, or something like that. But anyway, I'm putting a little bit of money there just into the account, not investing it into anything, because it helps with taxes at the end of the year. Okay, let's take a look at the cryptocurrencies. Okay, so 381 billion market cap, keeps growing every day, pretty much practically 1.5% increase, 5,915 coins, and generally green across the board, fairly low digits on Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP. Chainlink continues to defy gravity. Some others doing quite well, but Litecoin up about 2.3%, EOS at 10%, that's quite something, Tezos 5%. I mean, look at these numbers here. In the past 7 days, those are quite astonishing. I mean, look at that. Chainlink has almost doubled in 7 days. Amazing. Where else can you see these kind of numbers, right? Stellar just kind of creeping along. IOTA up 12.6%. So some of these coins are doing quite well. All right, and on to the online oracle, where we'll close up today's channel. Okay, so you remember when we were looking at this, the Fed's Kaplan here, who says that he thinks he can tweak the dials to within 2.25, 2.375%, so really within about 0.25% or less, even maybe 0.1%, about 10 basis points or so. And I don't think they can do that, so I thought I would ask the online oracle, the 8-ball economist, can the Fed control inflation within 0.5%? I doubt it. Let's see what the 8-ball says. Yes, they can. I'm wondering if this magic 8-ball is just giving me the same results all the time. I'm going to shake it again just to see if we get a different result. I'm going to own this specific result here. So the online oracle obviously believes that the Fed can control inflation within a 0.5% rate. And I think that's ridiculous, but I just want to test the magic 8-ball, see if it's actually working. If we get another result. Yeah, okay, so it is working. And again, it says the same thing. So there you have it, folks. I only do these live on the video, so I'm not searching for specific answers from the 8-ball economist, because frankly, it's just as ludicrous relying on an 8-ball as it is on any of these other Fed governors or economic analysts or anything that are out there. And that's the reason why I use it, just to kind of suggest that ridiculousness of that idea that anyone can foresee the future. But there you have it. So thanks so much for joining me. Feeling a bit salty today, as you might have heard. Anyway, that's my thoughts for today. Please share yours down below in the comments. I appreciate you spending time with me. Thanks so much. Remember to stay kind out there. Be patient. Let's squirrel away some savings, pay off some debt. Stay healthy, eat good food, lots of water, and take care of each other. And remember, dom spiro, spero.